Hello, everyone. Welcome to the live update for Richland School District 2. I'm Libby Root, the Senior Chief Communications Officer, and I'm joined by our great superintendent, Dr. Baron Davis, and our even greater, no, I'm just kidding, Deputy Superintendent, Dr. Marshalyn Franklin. Tonight, we're going to give you an update on how we plan on opening and beginning the 2021-2022 school year. Now, these plans are fluid, and we're still in the process of getting the information and sorting through lots of data and lots of details from different agencies, public health agencies. But tonight, we want to touch on it and then let you know where you can find more information and come back to hear more information in the coming weeks as we get ready for our first day of school on August 18th, right? August 18th, did I get that date right? 18th. Okay, all right. So we're actually changed the format. If you joined us for updates last year, we did all of them at one time and tried to cover it for employees and parents. And I got a little smart and learned that that was a lot to cram in to an update. So tonight we have two separate updates. One from 6 to 6:50 for employees. Now, if you're not an employee, that's okay. You can hang around and join us, but we're going to focus on any questions that come in on answering those for our employees. And then we will stop at 6:50 so we can transition for the 7 o'clock update, which will focus on parents. And it is a separate live stream event, so if you want to listen to both, you'll come out of this event and then click on the next live stream that starts at 7. And we'll end that one at 7:50 so that we're equitable in the amount of time we give for our employees and our parents. So at this time last year, I would give Dr. Davis an opportunity to start off with a welcome, but we do have a lot to cover tonight, and we want to have time for questions. So I'm going to go ahead and get started with the first topic that we want to discuss, and that is, what have we been doing this summer while we waited on guidance from the South Carolina Department of Health and Environmental Control, DHEC, to come out with the updated school guidance for this coming school year to get ready to put into place or change things from last year or do something different for this coming school year. And so I'm going to ask Dr. Franklin to walk us through that process of what school and district leaders have been doing this summer. Dr. Franklin.
Okay, around mid-July, our district team began having conversations about what school would look like as it relates to health and safety protocols when students and employees return this month. And so we just very roughly listed some health and safety protocols that we would likely have in place. And then around that time, the CDC released their guidance. And so we were able to go back to the rough draft that we had and make some things more to solidify some of that health and safety protocols as a reflection of what was in the CDC guidelines when they released their guidelines. And so we came up with a cleaner draft and shared that with our principals. We also had a survey question in the ESSER survey that went out to parents and employees that relates to health and safety, and so we gathered input from there. And then around that time, DHEC also released its guidelines for schools, guidelines that are specific to South Carolina. And then at that point, we took all of that information into consideration. So what we originally started out with, what we changed as it relates to in reaction to the CDC's recommendations, the input from our principals, who are our boots on the ground and in our schools, as well as DHEC's recommendations, and put all of that together and have come up with a final list of health and safety protocols that we will use while transmission is high. And I use the term final very loosely because this is a very fluid situation, and so some of that information may change, but we do have a pretty solid plan for right now for where we are based on the input that we've received as well as guidance that we've gotten from the CDC and DHEC.
And we're going to officially review that and plan in its entirety at the board meeting Tuesday night on August 10th. Board meeting starts, the public session starts at 6:30. And excuse me, and that we live stream our board meetings, so everyone at home, if you want to stay home, you'll be able to watch it from the comfort of your home and get that full update. We are going to touch on a few of those things in the plan, but first, I do want to turn to Dr. Davis and ask him to give us brief overview of what has been our guiding, I want to say guiding guidance, but that's really repetitive. What has been our focus as we've gone through this update, looking at these processes? What has been our goal?
Yeah, so our goal hasn't changed. We are focused on providing premier educational experiences for all the students of Richland School District 2, as well as a premier working environment for all of our employees. And so that requires that we put safety first. You cannot have premier educational experience or work experience in an environment that's not safe and secure. The challenges have come along, but there's been some conflicting, of course, with the guidance and when guidance comes and when it doesn't come, and what that would look like and what are the things that we can and cannot do. But we have all intentions of following the CDC and the DHEC guidelines to the greatest extent possible, where we're not restricted by law or some sort of injunction on what that or whatever that may be. And so where there is no restrictions, then we will continue to follow those guidelines and those recommendations and the guidance from the health officials, not here nationally as well as locally, as it relates to how to provide a safe and secure learning environment for the students in our schools, as well as a safe and secure learning environment for a safe and secure working environment for our employees. And so even though we can't require masks right now as of today, and I say that with all sincerity because information is constantly changing. As of today, we can't require and enforce a mask policy that we had in place all of last year. One of the things that we will definitely do will be to strongly encourage and highly recommend that everyone wears a mask while in schools. All ages, elementary, middle, and high school. And this is for their safety as well as the safety of others. Masks have been found to be a strong factor in mitigating the spread of the virus. And so it's important that we continue to practice those things that will allow us to do so. We can no longer require these things as we did last year, but that doesn't stop us from having strongly encouraging and highly recommending this in order to keep our students in school. The important thing for us is for our students to be in school and in classes. We've seen a lot over this last year, and we've learned a lot. And we lost a lot of instructional time as a result of the virus last year. And if we hope to recapture some of that instructional time this year, then it's going to be imperative that our students are in class and that our teachers are healthy as well and in class to teach those students. And so wearing a mask will allow us to or increase our probability of doing so. We're also strongly encouraging and highly recommending our employees as well as our students who are able to get vaccinated or who are eligible to be vaccinated to get the vaccine. If you're not vaccinated, then one of the big caveats of that is, if you are vaccinated, I should say, one of the caveats of that is you don't have to be quarantined if you are deemed a close contact. Unfortunately, if you are not vaccinated and you are deemed a close contact, we will have to quarantine you in order to follow the CDC and DHEC guidelines. Again, this is not against anyone or the decision. This is for the protection of the individuals in our classrooms, as well as our students and all of our employees, and in particularly for that population of students who cannot be vaccinated for a number of reasons, whether they're under the age of 12 or they have some sort of health issues that doesn't allow them to receive the vaccine.
Thank you very much, Dr. Davis. And I'm going to take just a moment of personal privilege and make a personal request that we open the chat up tonight so that we could get questions. And we do that with the hope that we will all engage in the chat in a respectful and collaborative manner. And so we really want to focus on putting questions there so that even if we don't have time to get to them tonight, we will work on getting answers and getting that information out to you. So that's just a personal request from the Chief Communications person who really values two-way communication, but we always want to do it in a way that is respectful and collaborative. Thank you. Now, we are going to move on to talk about some topics that from the survey responses, the open-ended survey question that kept rising to the top. They were very frequently either noted or asked questions in the survey that we want to touch on. And some of these will touch on the questions that I've already seen pop up in the chat. And that one is, first of all, in fact, I just saw this question pop up, is talking about what we can and can't do. And Dr. Davis, you've touched on that we really, after the DHEC guidance came out on Thursday, we made a very conscious decision that we were going to strongly encourage and highly recommend the mask. The mask on buses has changed. We've gone back and forth a little bit this summer. So you want to tell us about that?
Well, and let me say, we haven't gone back and forth. We received information we received notification that we could not indeed require students to wear a mask while on wear a mask while on our buses. I apologize. But we now have gotten a different piece of information, which just goes to show you how fluid this thing can be, that now says we indeed can or should and will require students to wear a mask because that came down from the federal government about transportation. I think that was a executive order that was issued that requires the wearing of masks on buses and transit, I think, systems. And so we will require our students to wear a mask while on our school buses, along with our employees who drive our school buses, again, for their safety and the safety of others. So that's definitely something that has changed. So.
All right, and then the second part of that question, I'm going to turn to Dr. Franklin because she has become an expert on state laws and state provisos over the past few months. And will you explain to our viewers why we can't require masks for students and employees?
Right. So when the state budget was approved at the end of June, like June 29th or 30th, there was a proviso attached to the budget, one of many provisos.
108, I think,
right,
pertaining to public education.
And so one of those provisos prohibits schools and its school districts from having a mask mandate for its employees as well as its students. And so a proviso is just like a law. It carries the same weight as a law. And so legally in the state of South Carolina, a school or a school district who receives state funding is not able to require masks of employees and of its students. I will share, though, however, that last night was our first public district event. I think since the mask requirement was lifted, we did summer school graduation. And I was very pleasantly surprised by people who elected to wear masks. Now, I didn't hand count the people, but I would guess probably around 90% of the people who attended that event elected to wear masks. I thought that was very complimentary of our community, and we're hoping that school will look the same or even better.
That's a great observation. I noticed that myself, and I spoke with a parent today. I said, I really think, we're going to be, when we say strongly encourage and recommend, we were updating signage today that said that, and you're going to hear that a lot from us over the next several days, and I have faith in our parents and our employees that we will all do what's best to protect ourselves and each other. All right, let's move on to the next topic that was commonly brought up in the responses, and this is our dividers. Who wants to talk to us about dividers? This is what we put in front of the students in the on their desk.
Yeah. Well, we'll be focusing on the elementary schools as well as sixth grade and keeping those dividers in place for our students since we can't require a mask. There's been some different literature that's been shared or research is shared regarding the impact or effectiveness of the dividers. However, since there's no requirement or since we can't require masks, we feel that is another level of mitigation to assist us in reducing the transmission of COVID, particularly at the elementary levels, because those students 12 and under cannot are not able to be vaccinated at this time. And so we will have those dividers in our classrooms. Our survey indicates to us, more importantly than anything, that people feel comfortable or more at ease if those mitigating factors are in place. And so whether or not it may reduce the transmission of COVID, it gives the perception or it gives them a level of comfort, particularly since we can't require the mask at the elementary level. So we want to provide that so that our students can, to some level, have a sense of normalcy in the classroom as they're focusing on the learning experience that we're providing for them.
And so for pre-K through sixth grade, those learning spaces will look very much like they did when we left in June. Again, because those students don't have the option of being vaccinated at this point. For our 7th through 12th grade learning spaces, we will still have barriers or dividers available, and so they could be used as needed upon request, just to make everybody feel comfortable. So that's what we'll do for the upper grades, for grades 7 through 12. That student population, of course, are people who can be vaccinated. And so we would, however, have the barriers available if they're needed and if they're requested in the classrooms already.
Great. Touched on it, like we both read through lots of those responses, and that was, the dividers came up a lot. Another one that came up is our cleaning of our facilities. And we have a vendor that we partner with, contract with, Service Solutions, we work very closely with. Will cleaning continue to be stressed this school year?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
Cleaning will continue to be stressed, particularly in those high touch point areas in our classrooms, door handles, doorknobs, those places like that, the high traffic and common areas in classrooms. And particularly if, unfortunately, we may have a positive case, we'll ensure that that classroom and that space is cleaned very thoroughly. But we will continue our daily routines of cleaning those spaces as we did last year.
All right. Dr. Franklin, do you want to add anything?
Nothing to add.
Okay. Hand sanitizing stations and hand washing. I think some of these I'll just touch on quickly, so we'll have time for questions because we are getting several questions. We will continue to provide supplies for that and stress the importance. I think I've pulled up Don McAdams' hand washing video. You will see that again this year going out, and there will be hand sanitizing stations in classrooms. Correct? The hand sanitizer in the classrooms.
Correct. Wipes and hand sanitizer.
Hand sanitizer. All right. What are we doing? Dr. Franklin, you have spent a lot of time talking with a lot of different people about visitors. Last year, we completely suspended that visitor policy. That suspension of that policy expired at the end of June. So what are the plans for this school year? Okay,
and so as Libby said, our visitor policy that we suspended last school year, where we weren't allowing visitors into the building or beyond the front office, except in extenuating circumstances, that expired on June 30th. And so as of today, we're back into our regular protocols for visitors and procedures for visitors. However, at the start of the school year, what we are doing procedurally is limiting classroom visitors to 2 people at one time, so that there aren't an excessive number of visitors in any one classroom at one time. In addition to that, we are on Tuesday night recommending to our board that we add to our face covering policy a requirement that visitors wear face coverings. You will recall that we mentioned the proviso or law that prohibits school districts from requiring students and employees to wear face coverings. That does not include visitors. And so where we are able to require face coverings, that's what we want to do. And so it will be our recommendation to our school board Tuesday night that we require our visitors to wear face coverings.
And the last thing I want to touch on before we get to the questions is contact tracing. And will that continue, and what will that look like?
It will continue, and we will continue our COVID dashboard that actually will be reactivated today. We'll continue to follow the guidelines as it relates to contact tracing. Once an individual has been deemed a close contact, we will initiate the procedures that we had in place last year to notify those individuals and then to begin immediately the quarantining procedures.
Right. Anything to add on that, Dr.? Well, I will go to our questions because, and our first one that I'm going to pick up is deals with that. And I know that we are still in discussions about this and trying to work out plans regarding leave for employees. But if an employee has to take leave because the COVID leave expired, They would have to use sick days, but we are looking at some different options to help with that, correct?
Correct. We're discussing how many days we will be able to extend through a COVID leave. As a
Basically
result,
come up with our own
Yeah.
type of supply of
Yeah.
COVID leave days.
for our employees who are unable to attend work because they either have COVID or may have been deemed a close contact, or may have a child that has been deemed a close contact, or may be sick as a result of COVID. So we are looking at how many days that we will be able to afford or extend to our employees this year as a result of that.
There's a question that we had actually, we're going to focus on this topic in the parent one, but we'll go ahead and touch on it a little bit. So we've got some notes here, so I'm going to bring that slide up. About will we be returning to virtual learning or having those e-learning days? And we have some limitations on that, like the mask. Dr. Franklin, you want
Right.
to
And
take
so,
that one?
unlike last year, e-learning will not be an available option at each of our traditional schools. Our traditional schools are returning to their regular face-to-face learning delivery, or their instruction delivery. Our virtual school will be the only option for an e-learning format for students this school year. And so we did dual modality last year when we were under the state's state of emergency. Our teachers did a phenomenal job, but at the end of the year, that practice, which we knew was not sustainable, did expire. And so we will return to our traditional face-to-face instruction in our traditional schools, and then our only e-learning option will be through the Richland 2 virtual program.
And one thing we will, certainly DHEC will take I think a bigger role this year in following number of cases, and we will be looking to public health agencies to direct us if there's a time where an entire school may need to be shut down because of the numbers. But that's not, we don't have that ability this year to make the example they gave was like before a holiday or after holiday, and that,
We don't have that flexibility.
we don't have that flexibility this year. There was a lot of flexibility, either by suspension of different state recs that helped us with that last year, and unfortunately, we don't have a lot of that this year.
All of the waivers, I think, that we received last year have now been rescinded or has expired. That allowed us to have some of the flexibility that we had last year. I would like to add, if it's okay.
Of course, Dr. Davis.
I would like to also add that I think it'll help, particularly if we have those who are listening and watching that are not necessarily employees because there are time issues, that we have some limitation when it comes to offering virtual options for our families. We can't, without penalty and a reduction of funding per student, go beyond 5% of our student body population that can be enrolled in some sort of in a virtual format this year. That 5% is not based off of today's enrollment or projected enrollment. It's actually based off of the 135th day enrollment from last year. And so we have to look at that number, and that determines the number of students that we can enroll in our virtual classrooms. We offered virtual here in Richland 2 from elementary to 12th grade last year. We'll continue to offer, as Dr. Franklin stated earlier, from elementary to 12th grade. And we are looking at the possibility of trying to add an additional teacher to help offset some of the increased desires to be in a virtual format. However, there is a limit in which we can exceed without then losing a good portion of the funding for that student. But we do want to put emphasis on the fact that our expectation of what we're trying to accomplish also is that we want our students in the classroom in face-to-face instruction, because we have found that the dual modality is not sustainable. And of course, the quality, the ability to deliver high quality instruction virtually for an extended year in this format is also not something that is the most favorable for our students. And so we still need that connection and still need them in schools and in classrooms.
Great. All right. I'm going to actually Sorry, y'all can't see the questions, only I can on my computer. Lots of technology going on here, folks. I'm multitasking, I'm moving a presentation, I'm on my computer. So give me a moment while I look through this. I think we've covered that. So this one just happened while we were like coming to get ready for tonight, and that is the mask mandate for the city of Columbia.
Yeah.
We heard a little bit about last night, so we were checking this today because we thought we might have one school in the city limits.
Yeah. We found out that we do not have any schools within the city limits. We verified that today by checking the GIS for the city of Columbia. So that one school that we thought was in the city limits or possibly could be in the city limits is not annexed into the city. So therefore, the city mask mandate doesn't apply to Richland School District 2 at this moment. And that's pretty much the sum of it. I mean, I don't know pretty much how much to explain other than that.
I think
doesn't
that's
really
it.
cover
We just want to clarify that we do not have any schools in the city limits, and therefore that does not apply to us. Along the mask lines, the proviso stated, we could not require masks with kind of a contingency, I guess. And some people have looked at that proviso, and technically we could, but we would suffer a substantial loss in financials.
That's correct.
We would lose state funding. There is no way for us to basically enforce a mandate without touching something that would require state funding, because our finance department ran a quick check, but we think that roughly 63% of our total funding for that general fund budget comes from state funding. And so if we put in a mask mandate, if I'm understanding this correctly, the state could pull that entire funding from us, and we would basically lose over half of our general fund budget. Is that how y'all understand it would work?
Yeah, I think they could. They say may. They're not definite. And we're still looking at a lot of that proviso. I was just recently rereading that proviso and got a different understanding even today. And that understanding was that you can't enforce a mask mandate. Doesn't say you can't require. I think it does. I want to be sure that it says you can't enforce. And I would imagine, but the difficulty of that is then how do you not enforce it? If you put it on the books, then what's the point if you can't enforce it? And someone that is enforcing it is an employee of the district who's being paid through state funds. So it's very cleverly worded, and it puts us in leadership in schools as we're trying to provide a very safe learning environment for my students. We have some challenges around that.
Dr. Franklin, I know this has been touched on some in some of the discussions we've had in our planning about will we still have virtual meetings across this is an employee question, of course. Will meetings be virtually, what type of guidance are we trying to solidify regarding virtual meetings and events where you may typically have a larger number of employees gathered?
And so for larger events, which includes things like your staff meetings, if your staff is 80 or more people, and even evening events that we have with staff members as well as parents or students, our first go-to is to maintain the 3 feet of physical distancing. And in cases where that is not feasible, then we're encouraging a variety of other options, which could include virtual options. It could include a hybrid options, for example, where there are some people who are in person and they're physically distanced by 3 feet, and then there are others who are participating virtually, or staggered attendance is another option available to our schools. So really what will happen in situations like that will be taken care of on a case-by-case basis at the school level, where the school leadership will decide, this is the event that we're trying to have. We anticipate having X number of people. What would be the best way to have this event? First, of course, they will be considering face-to-face, but only if we're able to maintain the 3 feet of physical distancing. And then if not, then using one of the other alternatives.
All right. Trying to keep track of the ones I should be scratching through these. I can't scratch them on my computer. this is one, Dawn McAdams is helping us answer questions on the chat, so she may have touched on this one, but I want to get this one answered. I do know the answer to it. It's about, will natural immunity be considered when determining if someone has to be quarantined? That actually, guidance comes straight from DHEC, and they tell us what we can and cannot consider in regards to whether or not someone has to quarantine. And as far as I know, and Dawn can echo this on the chat, we cannot look at natural immunity. It's just if you've been vaccinated or not, or possibly, I believe I saw maybe if you've had COVID within the last 3 months. But Dawn, if you haven't already, if you want to address that on the chat, I would appreciate it. And I want to give a shout out to Dawn McAdams, Will Anderson, Ish Tate, and Carmen Roan, who are helping me get questions here that we want to answer, as well as responding to them. Let's see, one of the common, we're going to explore this more on Tuesday at the board meeting, but we're talking about the ESSER funds and what we're getting a big pot of money. And one of the frequently recommended uses of those funds was the touchless fixtures for plumbing. And so we've gotten some questions about water filling stations. Are we looking at expanding those across the district?
We are, yeah. And I know Will's on the chat, so he could probably
That's right, he probably did, yeah.
He probably can give a more thorough and detailed answer to that. But yes, that has been in discussions, and I think it's a budgeted item to increase the water filling stations throughout our district in places where we don't have them. A lot of our schools already have them there, many have them there, but it would be important for us to ensure that for the safety of our students and staff that we have those touchless fixtures. I think we saw that in both sets of surveys as a high priority from parents as well as employees.
Yes, I think so. And one thing we've talked about, and we haven't put it in the budget, but it's a question that comes up, is this, will parents be asked to send their kid with a water bottle? And that would certainly be something we're going to recommend, but we may also look at making a purchase of water bottles and having them available. We may not purchase one for every single student employee, but we may like to have a supply at every school to help with that, especially as we transition and get those touchless or water filling stations at the schools. Let's see. In terms of the dividers, we are going to, when we say required, we're going to have them in place at every, in the elementary and sixth grade. And we heard this a lot about the initial dividers that we had put in place. That those were the first ones that came out of the State Department of Education and put out there for schools to buy, and they have those white borders around there. What are we trying to do? Because we did hear that they may have been some issues with seeing.
Obstruction, yeah.
So are we trying to maybe cycle those out?
Right, that is our goal, is to cycle as many of those out as we can and do just the clear dividers.
Clear dividers, so that you get a full view in the whole area. Got it. Electrostatic sprayers. There's, and I hope maybe Will might address this too, but the use of those sprayers, again, as we went through the year, we learned that some things maybe weren't as effective as we thought, and certainly maybe not effective for using every day or weren't appropriate to use every day. So repeat for me, if we've already mentioned it, I'm sorry, how we're going to use those electrostatic sprayers.
Right, so we're really focusing this year on those high traffic areas, high volume areas like the cafeteria, the front office, spaces where we have like large numbers of people transitioning in and out through the day, and then also using them in classroom spaces where a student or an employee has tested positive.
Lunch, meals, we haven't talked about that, and there are a few questions about what our lunches will look like this year.
And so our food service provider, Sodexo, is preparing to package our, or prepare meals that can be grab-and-go style meals as they were last year. We are expecting schools to minimize the number of students eating in the cafeteria. For example, at the elementary level, if there are 4 kindergarten classes, one strategy that can be used is to have 2 of the classes eat in the cafeteria this week while the other 2 eat in their classrooms, and then flip-flop them on the next week. And so kind of using this A-B rotating schedule of who gets to eat in the cafeteria. Now, I'm not sure what our manpower will be in terms of delivering lunches to classrooms, but we have settled on it's okay for students to go through the line to pick up their own lunch, even if they're not eating in the cafeteria. So for example, that kindergarten example that I gave you about A-B, so if the A students are eating in the cafeteria, the B students could still come in and go through the line to pick up their lunch, but then return to class to eat lunch in the classroom. And so we're recommending or expecting at middle school that our schools also work on minimizing the number of students who are in the cafeteria setting at one time. Depending on the size and population of the school, the structure and size of the cafeteria, that will vary from school to school, but you can expect there to be fewer students in the cafeteria than in previous years.
I would say that the guidance on what lunch is going to look like is forthcoming. The official, clear guidance Dr. Franklin's just touched on, kind of the overview of what that looks like. But it's going to be important for employees to, they'll be receiving that information on exactly what lunch and breakfast is going to look like at their school, because it's not necessarily a one-size-fit-all scenario. So you'll be getting that information from your school administrators, from your school principals, once we're able to give them the guidance, so then they can work out the actual logistics of how they're going to meet the expectations of the district as it relates to that. But the overall is to reduce the number of students that are going to be in the cafeteria at one time.
This is a question, and also this came up with in the survey responses, and Dr. Davis, I want to talk with you about this, because we can't require it, is there any options? These are the questions being asked. Do you separate students with mask, without masks? Do teachers, employees have an option to only work with a certain designated group of students?
We cannot do that. One of the things that we found out, of course, that we know from last year is that as an employee, you have the option to wear your mask. So if there's concerns, I would think the first line of defense in reducing the spread of COVID, if there's concern, is to ensure or to exercise your option to wear your mask, particularly as you're working with the possibility of a population of students who may be unmasked and either can't get vaccinated or have decided not to get vaccinated. But we can't, as employees, ostracize, discriminate, exile, or place students in an uncomfortable position because they chose or their parents have chosen for them not to be vaccinated. The same as we can't do for employees. We can't have a set of faculty meetings and split them up by individuals who are individuals who have been vaccinated and those who have not been vaccinated. We're not allowed to do that, and so we will not practice that in Richland School District 2.
With this classroom setup, Dr. Franklin, I think you will be good to answer this one. Let me find the exact question because I want to ask it. The elementary continues to use dividers. Is it okay to assume that early childhood classrooms should not set up as centers, grouping them? So I think there was some recommendations out of DHEC about placement of desk.
Okay, now where possible, we do advise for students to all face the same direction. That's not very typical in an elementary classroom, probably not even in some of our secondary classrooms. However, in settings where that is possible, that is a recommendation that students face the same direction. And then outside of that, we are either doing the 3 feet of physical distancing of students in a classroom, and if that's not possible, then definitely the barriers.
Barriers, right. All right. Testing for COVID, that's one at different school sites. So far last year we didn't do that. It is an option that's been offered to schools. It does put an additional burden on our school nurses that already have a lot to do. But we do have some options for testing in Richland too, because we have a partner that is offering free testing at least in the district.
I would say that we're fortunate and blessed in the sense that we live in a community and we live in an area where there's random or multiple places and service providers that are testing. And we have been running a testing location in our district for several months now. And that location is here at R2I2 and is still open, not only to our faculty and staff, but also to our students and our parents. And I would encourage anyone, an individual, to take advantage of the opportunity to be tested here if they should think that they may have, if they've been deemed a close contact, to immediately get tested at one of those locations. But you're absolutely right to set up the manpower to do testing at schools when we have so many other obligations and responsibilities, particularly as our nurses are trying to track close contacts and also possibly deal with those who are sick and those who may be sick or ill that don't have COVID. We've not forgotten about them. We'll have more students back in school this year than we had last year, so there'll be several students in the office that will be sick that may not necessarily be sick as a result of COVID. And so we don't have the manpower to continuously to sustain that throughout the entire year.
All right. I know at the college level they do, but I think one of the important things to remember is the college level, they set up a designated site, very similar to what we have, and students are pulled randomly to go to that site, and they have a designated team of people who focus on the testing. And we don't have those resources at the district. One of the questions is about purchasing portable air purifiers for spaces, for example, small office spaces. I can say one thing with that. In a small office space, we would encourage that there's not a multiple people in that small office space. That would be one of the first recommendations. We've also been working on our air circulation and improving that. Dr. Davis, you want to talk about some of the facility improvements for that?
Well, of course, we've updated our HVAC systems. We've been updating our HVAC systems throughout the district where they've been deemed or designated as needing updated as a result of our bond referendum. We have included our air filters as well. I think we're using one of the highest level air filters that's out there. I believe it's MERV 13. I can never remember if it's 13 or 16.
Will Anderson,
Will
if you're in the
Anderson
chat,
knows.
put that in.
Exactly, but we do have a high level of that, and we have looked at the possibility of adding in some of those additional filter systems. Again, Mr. Anderson is researching that and will provide us with the appropriate information so that we can make wise decisions and choices in the purchasing of those devices in our schools.
Dr. Franklin, there's a couple of questions in here about special education classrooms and accommodations and mitigation strategies in that. That will be coming out of the special education department for those teachers, especially when they return next week. Is that what they can expect to look for?
Right, and so one of the items in our health and safety protocols is providing additional PPE for special education employees, so we teachers and teaching assistants who do come in very close contact with students, some of whom may not be masked, as well as for our nurses.
And that brings up a good point that last year we had lots of masks around our buildings. I'm assuming we'll still make those available.
Absolutely.
And then, will school hours be adjusted again?
As Dr. Davis stated earlier, a lot of the waivers and allowances that we had last year and flexibility in terms of how we delivered instruction and how we could make some changes to our traditional school day are no longer in place. And so we are returning to our 2019-2020 school schedules.
And field trips, travel, how are we going to handle that this year?
Okay, and so we last year had a set of travel considerations that if a teacher or a principal was wanting students to go on a field study, they would sit down with that document and go through the protocol and answer the questions. And if we get a yes to all of the questions, then it was okay to do the field study. What happened because of the physical distancing of 6 feet, that answer was typically no, as the principal or teacher considered the field study. Now that we are physical distancing with 3 feet, I think more field studies would be possible. Again, in smaller groups of students, so probably not all of 6th grade going on a field study on the same day at the same time, but could possibly happen through being staggered. And so really, if you're a teacher who is considering a field study, your principal has access to the travel considerations for students and can make that available to you, and you can go through the protocol with one of your school administrators to see if the field study is deemed safe to go on.
One of the things that we will need to take in consideration also when making field study requests is also looking at one, will the place that you're visiting be accepting visitors at that time? 2, what are their requirements? Because although we may not be able to require students to wear masks while in schools and classrooms, depending on where you're going, they may require that. And so parents should be fully aware of that prior to scheduling those field studies, so that we don't have to have cancellations and things of that nature, as well as if there's been any travel advisories that may change between now and then from CDC or DHEC regarding field studies. So a lot of this is fluid. Don't etch this in pen yet, because that's one of those things that could change within the next month or so.
And one other thing you want to really study prior to committing to a field study is refund policies. So, for example, in June, we did not anticipate that we will be where we are today in terms of COVID transmission in our community. And so if you are thinking about a field study for the spring, and it's one of those field studies where a deposit is required in August or September, you really want to read the terms of the contract very, very carefully to see what the refund procedures are for that particular field study. You don't want to find yourself in a situation where a deposit has been made and you're not able to get a refund in the event that we don't do the field study in the spring.
That's a great tip. That's wonderful. We probably got time for one more question, and I'm going to take this one question that's come up, and then Dr. Davis asked you to kind of lead it into some maybe brief closing remarks. This question is about, are teachers permitted to request IEP, parent meetings, 504 meetings be held virtually? And what that made me think of was discussions that we've had since the end of last year, all summer, about there are some things that we did during the last year that worked really well and had some great benefits. And one of those was virtual parent meetings. So you want to answer that and talk about that message that we've shared about there are some good things that we want to carry with us.
Well, I think, and I've shared this with employees last year, we found that our participation rate in parent conferences, IEPs, 504 meetings, many of those things held virtually. We saw an increase in participation as a result of that because it made it convenient for parents. It reduced travel time. They didn't have to necessarily take off from work a half a day. Maybe they could use their lunch break in order to get these meetings done and complete some of the things that needed to be completed, whether it was IGP meetings or whatever the planning things that are necessary for parents to do. So I encourage us to look at those things that work really well. There's no issue or we're not prohibiting you from having those meetings virtually with parents, particularly if the parent agrees with it. I would say it would be one of those things to offer it as an option to a parent to be convenient to their schedule as well as convenient for your schedule. So it's one of those things, as we talked last year about, when you move from an old house to a new house, you can't take everything with you, but some things that you take with you have some significance and value. And so there's some things that we're going to leave behind that don't work, but there's some things that work effectively, some things that were innovative and we were forced to innovate. That's one of them. So I would encourage us to take those types of practices with us to our new era of providing public education or educational opportunities, experiences for our students. So I definitely encourage that type of innovation.
Well, we're down to 1 minute, so I'm gonna do the hard, fast stop. Know we have some questions we didn't get to, and so I'm gonna take this chance to plug the R2HQ new employee intranet site. We will work, the communications team will work with getting answers to questions that we weren't able to touch on tonight, and we'll be posting them there. We will work out maybe a new channel specifically dedicated to our health and safety plan for COVID. Ish is probably sitting there going, there she goes again, coming up with another idea. But I think we'll definitely use the R2HQ this year to help answer questions related to our health and safety plan. So we'll let you know when some of those answers are posted there. And we're going to wrap up the employee-focused live update and transition, give my guests a moment to take a break, get a sip of water, and we'll be back at 7 o'clock. And the second event, make sure it's not going to be the same event if you're going to join us again. We'll be repeating a lot of the same information at the beginning and then looking for questions from parents. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll see you soon.